Hello, everyone, and welcome back to an interview with, where here on this series, I meet up and I interview any types of creators, whether they be comic book creators, YouTube creators, or photography creators. I actually have with me a wonderful comic book writer that I met at Reading Comic Con last year, and two of his artists. So, John, do you want to just give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, I'm John Short, and I write comics. At the moment, I'm working on an anthology comic called Shockwave, which has got 4 strips in it, and I write them all. But each of the strips has a different artist on it, and two of the artists are here tonight. Half the art team, in fact.
So we'll start with we'll just do it alphabetically. So we'll start with you, Adam. Just a quick introduction about yourself as well.
Yeah, I draw comics. John approached me a while back when the first artist for the clock story sort of left, so I took over duties from then. Prior to that, I've just been sort of kicking around the indie circuit for many years, working with many writers. Yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell, really. Whenever I can find the time to do it, I do it, and I've had sort of limited success, shall we say? But yeah, I'm still here, still enjoying it, still creating. So
okay, and you, Richard.
It's just one of those questions that you're never quite ready for, and I wasn't prepared to talk for them. Essentially, been drawing comics for decades. Ran into John, 25 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, I think.
It's getting on for 30, I believe. Something like
25
that.
25 sounded better. Did some stuff with him, and then I kind of packed it in and went into retail for a while. Then came out kind of retirement to do the Reverend Cross stuff. And again, there was a kind of lull after that where I thought, well, do I really want to continue doing this because there's other stuff going on in my life? And then he pulls me back in to do probably the first colour strip I've ever done in my entire life. And I'm enjoying the hell out of it, really. So, yeah. You never know where things are going to take you when you're doing these kind of things. So.
No, I think it's the same thing with all types of creating. As long as you're enjoying what you do, then you know that I think that's all that really matters. In that fact, you still enjoy it. It still gives you some kind of enjoyment, and you can sit there and you can be happy about what you're doing. Then I think that's the greatest reward out of everything. At least with me, anyway. But I don't know if anybody's there.
absolutely, yeah.
So, John, what inspired you to be a comic book writer?
It's a good question, and to be honest, I've no idea. But I guess to answer the question, I would say that my brother had a big influence on it. My late brother was 6 years older than me, and so he got into comics well before I did. And had comics going back to the 60s. He had early Avengers, Fantastic Four, stuff like that. So and he got into things in the 70s, the 2000 AD and stuff before I did, and I started sort of reading his stuff, his collection, and got excited about it, and probably the fact that I'm dyslexic has a lot to do with why I love comics. I think the combination of pictures and words on the page just makes it easier for someone with dyslexia, for example, to get into it and read. And I just love the combination of art and words on the page. I mean, the different artists just absolutely amazingly bring a completely different feel to whatever you're doing. And I mean, Adam and Richard here today, they couldn't be more different artists. Adam's stark black and white, very slick and very, very stylish. You know, almost classical. You know, and but Richard's, you know, he's perfect for a futuristic strip. He's so smooth and slick, and his characters so expressive, you know, and in color. I'm glad I asked him to do his strip Resistors in color, because his color stuff is just fantastic.
Yeah, you sent over.
At one point, I was actually cursing your name for it.
You sent over some of the artwork, and I was having a look through. I looked through it all when you sent it over, but I was having another look through just to see which ones to pull up later on. And just seeing the different styles between the two of you is really, like, you know, completely, especially for, like, you know, all the comics that John writes, having two different artists that do two different styles. I think like the way it blends in really well as well is just perfect. So we'll start with Richard first. What inspired you to be a comic book artist?
Oh, that's my dad's fault. He used to work in a coach builder's place, so he knew about airbrushing, spray guns, that kind of thing. And I was always a kind of goofy kind of. I always liked to draw as a child. And then he started bringing home things like, you might remember him enjoying the kind of landscape Spider-Man comics. It was like Spectacular Spider-Man.
The Marvel UK reprints of Spider-Man.
He was bringing that stuff home, and it just blew me away. And it wasn't until years later I realised that he actually read them before he brought them back to me. So you're reading that stuff as a kid, and you're blown away. But talking about the different styles of artists, the stuff that was in those comics couldn't have been more different. You had John Romita Sr. compared to like Gil Kane, things like that. Those two guys, even though they were kind of similar, but they were very, very different, it just blew you away. So it was right there and then I decided, well, this is what I want to do. And, you know, maybe I should have picked a different career path and done something more ordinary. But I was obsessed, and I have been ever since, you know. So, yeah, my dad's fault.
What about you, Adam?
It's a similar thing, but not with the dad thing. But it was just, I mean, there wasn't much going on sort of for kids in the sort of late 70s. And I mean, especially where I grew up in a little tiny village, and the little news agents would have, you know, the odd issue of the Spider-Man or 2000 AD, and I'd pick it up, and it was just, I didn't know what, it was just absolutely phenomenal. It was just an escape. It was just, you know, fantasy and science fiction. There was nothing on the TV like it. There was, you know, there's only 3 channels. You know, there was nothing going on. And then occasionally I'd go to another town with my parents, and they'd have a little section just on the floor with old Spider-Man comics and stuff like that. And I'd be able to get some of those, and that would be like a real treat. And then I'd go home and I'd just practice drawing, because I just enjoyed drawing, even from the age of, you know, 7 or 8 years old. And it just, I don't know, it spoke to me somehow. And then as I've sort of progressed through, I got aware of many artists and many styles. And then it's just, I suppose it's just been, I just love art. I went to art college. I've always enjoyed being creative and drawing. I don't think a day's gone by when I haven't done something. And it's just, like John said, it's that mesh between the words and the pictures, and it can be done a million different ways, and it creates, and it can evoke such an emotion if it's done correctly, I think. And that's what I've been striving for the last sort of, well, I've been drawing since I was 8, 9, 10, so the last 40 or so years. And I'm fascinated by it, and I still love to learn, and I love to see how other people approach the same story, like Vincent, who I took over from, and he did The Clock. Although we have a similar kind of interest in the kind of realistic characters, our styles are completely different, but they both still work. And I think I still refer back to Vincent's work quite a lot on this clock, and I sometimes look at it and think, how did he do that? I couldn't do that. And then I look at my stuff, and it's like, well, but it still works. And this is what I find very, very intriguing about comics, and why even as I get older, I don't see why I should put them down and not enjoy something I actually really love creating and reading. So
Yeah. So obviously, how do you approach the character development when it comes to writing a comics?
That's a very good question. Again, I looked at your question on the cheat sheet that I got earlier, and I thought to myself, how am I going to somehow? The truth is that I tend to let the characters tell me what they want to do, and I know that sounds rubbish. That's not planning and or anything, but the truth of the matter is that the characters have come from somewhere, somewhere in your brain. They're either a part of your personality or someone that or someone that maybe there's somebody you've seen on TV, maybe they're a real person or whatever, or how you imagine a real person is, but you bring the plot, and then you bring the character, and sometimes the characters refuse to do the plot that you designed for them, and it's because in some way you're applying your mind to it to say, what would this person do in this situation? And it's your instinct for personality won't let you have a character say something just because it's convenient, or do something just because it's convenient. And so it's very much instinct, and it's not it's not big plans and stuff. I do, obviously I'm planning the plots and stuff, but sometimes you just get it's like you come up against a rock that your character won't do the thing that you want them to do.
Okay. So there was obviously one question that I wasn't on the sheet when I sent it out, but there's one question I wanted to ask both Richard and you, Adam, is how do you go from obviously John's ideas for, like, if it's a new character or a new outfit or kind of like a new design for a character, how do you go about from John's idea to the final product that's in the comics? We'd go with Adam first.
Well, with John's, it's very much set in sort of the late 1930s in America. So fashion kind of dictates itself. There are a number of films, and there's an awful lot of reference from that period, noir films, and so I find myself, I do work from photographs, as reference, so I do tend to delve into a lot of whatever I can find, and the internet is full of it. There we go. So it's a lot of old kind of movie stars and things. So if I'm drawing from the 30s, I tend to use reference actually from the 30s. So I will sit through old films on YouTube and try and find a scene that interests me, see how it's shot, see if I can incorporate that into the page somehow. So there's not actually a huge amount what I'd call design work. There is just a hell of a lot of research, and then reference collating, and then a case of trying to sort out which pictures you want to use in which paragraphs and how it moves the story along. So John's work, because it's very set in that era, so you can't deviate past like the late 1930s, fashion-wise or anything.
To explain, the Clock is a real 1930s comic character that is now public domain. So we've revived him, but we kept him in the 1930s, and we're doing a sort of film noir style take on him, and Adam's art is just perfect for that. And I do sometimes suggest, an actor that he might like to base the character on, and then he picks somebody else.
Yeah.
And obviously,
But I don't mind. He always picks someone who's appropriate.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
same question to you, Richard. How do you go from John's idea to the final product that's obviously that you draw up?
When it comes to the character, I mean, if you take the initial, the main character, Jez, for it, John didn't really have much of a description of her outside the fact that she was kind of Asian looking. Beyond that, there wasn't much more. I mean, he kind of described some of the clothing items that she might be wearing, sort of thing. And then it was a case of just sitting, with the sketchbook and trying to make, try to decide what she kind of looked like. And as the process goes on, you think, well, the hair's got to be kind of long. I want the character to have long hair because as she moves, you can use the hair for movement, that kind of thing. But the one thing that I didn't expect was to give her purple hair, because the initial drawing that I did, that I sent you, she had kind of bluish hair, kind of dark blue. But then in the actual art that I did for the first episode, I gave her purple hair. And it was just one of those things that I thought, well, okay, the purple hair works, let's just go with that. There's no real kind of, I don't sit down and deliberately think, well, I'm going to use this, and I'm going to have this kind of particular style to something. It just happens on the page. Pretty much in the same way that when he's actually writing the stuff, the characters will take the lead in his own head, and they'll develop out the way they are. The drawings happen exactly the same way. The backgrounds, because they're all kind of 3D environments, you start off with a blank screen and a basic geometric shape, and then you've got to come up with the resistor store, that it's all based in. Then you've got to figure out a way to texture it as well. So you end up taking photographs of brick walls. I must look like an idiot to the neighbours around here. And there's that strange guy who takes pictures of the road again, just as to use the texture in the backdrop. But the backdrops are really just, there to give the characters some more substance. But the characterization of them, it just happens. There's no real, I don't sit and think, well, the guy's got to have the same kind of framework as Arnold Schwarzenegger. It just happened that way. But the one character that I did enjoy drawing more than any other was Leakey. He was actually great fun because I thought, let's make him look as ridiculous as possible, right down to the kind of fashionized ideas. I mean, I was sitting with my wife drawing him, and she went, give him high heels like Prince. And I thought, that's a great idea. Let's put buckles on them and make them kind of, Puritan style shoes as well. So that's how that all happened. It just happenstance. And as John says, sometimes it works. Sometimes you look at something a couple of days later and you go, that's not working. So you got to scrap it and start again. But that.
Yeah, to explain, Richard, amazing way of working is that he puts together on the computer his backgrounds and things like vehicles and stuff for Resistors, the strip that he does, and creates like a 3D environment in the computer, and then he hand draws the people and puts them in to the 3D environment. Yeah. So it's just an amazing way of working. I don't know anybody else, any other comics artists that work that way, and it's just fantastic for a strip that's set, in the near future and is about a robot rebellion. It just fits so well.
Yeah. You sent me. I'll put it up now. You sent me this, one of the some of the artwork, and when I was looking over this, and I was obviously looking at the 3D renderings, and then obviously the artwork in and around it. Like you said, I don't think I've seen any other people really do that kind of thing in the comic book industry. Or at least I haven't heard of anyone who does it as well.
And it's brilliant. It works so well for the strip itself. It's so appropriate for Resistors. Yeah.
So obviously you sent me. So again, like the hand drawing of the characters as well is really well done. So is that how you kind of you do it? You hand draw it, send it over to John to see how John likes it and if he approves, and if he approves, and if there's any feedback and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It works so well for the strip itself. It's so appropriate for Resistors.
Yeah. So obviously you sent me. So again, like the hand drawing of the characters as well is really well done. So is that how you kind of you do it? You hand draw it, send it over to John to see how John likes it and approves, and if there's any feedback and stuff like that.
I think
Not
all
really.
the artists
It really
on
gets to the
Shockwave to send me the finished artwork. Really, they don't ask for any feedback part way through. They just go, here are the finished pages.
Yeah, but sometimes we'll say to you, we send them over to you for approval, first of all, and if you've got any issues with them. I mean, a couple of times you've come back to me and said, can we just do this, can we do that? And I set things up in such a way that all the finished pages are done in Photoshop, and some artists, I don't know how Adam works with any, if you scan them in, how many layers of Photoshop you've got. I've got sometimes 50 layers of these things, because so that I can go back, and if John's got any issues about a hand or a lighting setup or a lighting effect, that kind of thing, it can easily be altered. Sometimes in 60 minutes, sometimes it takes a lot longer.
I do the same kind of similarity thing with when it comes to my thumbnails, because when I first started on the channel doing YouTube videos, my thumbnails weren't great. They were bog standard. Some of them were just my logo. And now, like, coming through nearly 2 years now, I've started improving the thumbnails. One thumbnail I done had about 100 different layers, and I'd done that probably about 6 times, and I had 6 different thumbnails for just one video that I just kind of picked the best looking one out of the 6, and I was kind of like, okay. Then I had to go and delete all of those layers to obviously, make the final one, and then kind of, slightly move like text or like anything that was on the screen for the thumbnail. But I didn't realize like the amount of time and energy I spend in just doing the artwork for the thumbnails now. Some of it I take longer doing the thumbnail than I actually do doing the actual video. So it's ridiculous on how much artwork goes into everything now. So with the comic book industry, see with a lot of everything else, new trends come out and new, technology is available, new ways of doing things. How do you stay up to date with everything? We'll go with Adam first.
I don't really. I don't tend to use any technology with drawing. I have a scanner that I send off stuff to John with, but I don't have laptops or art programs or anything. It's just a drawing on a piece of paper. It's very, very old school.
Do you use a brush or a pen for your stuff?
It's just a fine liner. I mean, there you go. That's one that was recently sold on the Kickstarter. Literally just got a photograph on my tablet, drew it onto the piece of paper. I don't tend to worry too much about. So the actual process is incredibly quick because there's no layers, and how you said and how Richard has said about the layers and you get a wonderful effect from it, but I don't know if I'd have the patience, even if I had the ability to actually do that. If John doesn't like something that I've done, or a page, or I can ditch that page. I'll just do another one, literally throw it away, or cut and paste like old school, literally glue it a piece of paper, and it's a very, very. So I don't tend to worry about keeping up with the technology and trends as well. It's trends come and go. I mean, it's comics are comics. Comics are timeless, so it doesn't really matter to me anyway. So,
what about you, Richard? Because obviously you do a lot of stuff on Photoshop, and Photoshop is ever so evolving. It evolves constantly.
I didn't learn to use Photoshop in 2000. I was working for a video game company at the time, and they gave us copies of the programs that I use now. My computer programs are that old. They're 24 years old. I haven't updated them. I don't see the point in updating. They work. Okay. The thing is, if I was to update them, there'd be a lot of stuff there that I don't know how to use. I don't know how to use half the stuff in Photoshop as it is. So I do about 5 or 6 different things in Photoshop. That does me. The lightweight, the 3D rendering thing, same thing again. I know the basics about how to use it, and that is it. I'm a dinosaur. The computer I've got is still working on Windows 7 as well. So, it's the kind of thing that if it's not breaking, I don't see the point in updating it or doing any of that. In fact, trying to update it absolutely terrifies me, because then it's that whole, you've got to relearn things. As to trends, there's nothing worse than buying into a trend or something, because if you look at the comic books of the 90s, you look at them now, it just still screams 90s. You know, they're never going to get out of that. There's stuff that happened in the 80s and the 70s you could get away with now. There's stuff that you could do now you would have got away with back then. But in the 90s, it was just all this house style rubbish. And it's even now, it's just kind of like, I still can't appreciate it. I didn't appreciate it then. I kind of stopped buying mainstream comics back in the kind of late 90s, and I haven't gone back to buying comics since then. I buy the indie stuff that's actually interesting, which is why
totally.
I like Shockwave. The idea behind Shockwave, you've got 4 completely different strips. They really shouldn't work together. They shouldn't work in a comic book, but they do, because they're so different. If you had 4 strips in there that all looked fairly similar and all played fairly similar story-wise as well, it just simply wouldn't work. But Shockwave, as it is, does actually work.
Totally.
Yeah. So, question for John, obviously mainly, but obviously you two feel free to answer as well. But how do you handle feedback and criticism, especially from the audience perspective?
Yeah, well, where I mainly get criticism or feedback is at the conventions. To be honest, you don't get many letters or emails, but you do. I do occasionally get some nice emails, but they're very few, and it's very difficult to get reviews. Adam sent me a list of reviewers recently. It may have been a bit old, and I spent about 3 hours sending off digital copies to reviewers to try and get some reviews, feedback of Shockwave, and and as yet I haven't had a reply. I don't know that any of them have reviewed it, or I must Google it later and see if there are any reviews out there. But over the years I've had a few reviews, and and it's sometimes difficult, when you have a critical one. I still remember one of my earliest comics. I remember word for word what they said, which was, feels like it was written by a particularly backward 3-year-old.
Brutal.
I won't tell you.
Choice of words.
I won't tell you who said that, but they are still about in the industry. I don't send them review copies anymore.
No.
So
either.
I mean, that's not constructive criticism. You can't learn and grow from that, can you? But no, I mean, you do, especially at the table. I mean, for example, what was very nice a recent convention was I do a comic called Reverend Cross, which there you go. Richard drew that cover there for it. And at a recent convention, it was a 2-dayer, a lady bought the first issue off the table, and then the second day, on the Sunday, she came back and she bought all the 6 other issues.
Oh, wow.
And said, I was laughing my head off at that. I thought it was brilliant. And that way makes it all worth doing when you have something like that.
Yeah, I saw the Reverend Cross issues when we met. They were on your table, and I the thing that was eye-catching to me was the artwork. That was kind of like, as I was walking past your table, that's kind of what drew me to you, is seeing the artwork on the front covers. Yeah,
well, there's a lot of artists, a lot more artists than even on Shockwave, on Reverend Cross. I originally developed it with an artist called Jason Dennis, but he wasn't able to draw as many stories as I wanted to tell about Reverend Cross. So I said, is it okay if I get other artists in? And I got Richard in and other people as well. And so, there's, a lot of different people. That's the first collection there, and the cover is by Vincent Danks, who used to draw the clock strikes in Shockwave. There you go. That's criticism for you.
Yeah, to Adam and Richard, do you ever get any feedback or criticism from the audience?
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on, Darren.
No, are you sure?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, over the years, you like John says, you get reviews and things, and it does affect you. It does affect you deeply because you're putting an awful lot of time and heart and soul into this. So I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But at the end of the day, some people like your stuff, some people don't, and I think as long as you keep the confidence in yourself to know that you're producing the best that you can, it might not be the best in the world, but it's the best that you can do. And as long as you've got some fans, it doesn't matter if some people don't like it, I think. And that's kind of how I've dealt with it. So now I sort of associate myself with the people who do like the way I draw and appreciate it. And I don't know. You find a niche. A lot of people don't like the way I draw because it's of a sort of realistic nature, and I use reference. And I think a lot of purists think that art shouldn't have that. Comic art shouldn't be like that. But there are so many people over the years that have used that style, and that's the stuff that's appealed to me personally, because I find it gives stories more depth and gravitas somehow, and you can play with expression and things. So at the end of the day, if I'm producing stuff that I'm happy with, and in this case, as long as John's happy with it as well, because he's the guy in charge, then I think I can almost weather the knocks, So it's some people like it, some don't. I think it's just kind of like life, really, isn't it?
There was a magazine in the 90s called Comic World. I don't know if you guys remember it, but they ran a review of two of the kind of small press comics I was doing at the time, and I got absolutely savaged to the point where it was probably the worst review they ever gave anyone in that particular publication. But I've actually kept that review and I framed it because it was attributed to somebody else who was a friend of mine, and he went, I didn't like that. He says, even if I had written it, I would have wanted to get paid for it, but he never got paid for it either. So I mean, you get savaged fairly early on. You build that thicker skin slightly, and as Adam says, if people are coming up to you saying, I love this part or I love that part, then that kind of makes the rest of the nonsense, the detractors, not really count as much. Do you know what I mean? I've taken recently some of the Shockwave stuff to a little craft fair that happens close by to me. I did conventions for years, but I don't do them anymore because it's all cosplayers and what have you. But anyway, I go to these craft fairs and I take the Shockwave stuff with me, and I've got painted paintings that I go with as well. And you're sitting there, and I've got to the point now where if I sell anything or not, I don't care. Because at least once in the 3 or 4 hours that you're there, I have somebody coming up and going, this stuff's amazing. Whether it's the comics or whether it's the paintings that I'm taking with me, it makes no difference. If you have just that one person that comes up and says, this is amazing, they don't know me, I don't know them, they've got no agenda. Whether they buy something or not, just that one comment is enough to actually make you go back and start doing things again. Adam's stuff in particular, I'm going to point this out to Adam, is that you're saying you use reference. Part of the fun of looking at your stuff is trying to figure out where the reference is from. You go, I've seen that movie. I've seen that person from somewhere. And the one thing that's kind of irritating me about Adam's work, even now, is the fact that he's never referenced Veronica Lake. You know, come on, get on with it.
It'll
Veronica Lake
happen.
was amazing looking.
We'll work something out for that. I'll keep
It's
losing
in the
tickets.
background.
Even in the background, you know, just as a kind of subtle nod. Because I'm trying to find a way to work her into the Resistors stuff as well, and I haven't found a way to do it yet.
I'll make a note of that. I'll squeeze that in somewhere.
One last question. If you could collaborate with anybody in the comic book industry, alive or dead, so if you could, for the dead ones, if you could go back in time and collaborate with them, whether they're an artist, a writer, or anything else to do with the comic book industry, who would it be and why? We'll start with John.
Frank Quitely. I love his stuff. I think he can draw anything. He's just amazing artist. Quick story, very brief story. I saw a convention panel that he was on, and he was on about that he'd always liked to draw Daredevil, but he hates the idea of having to draw New York. And I was so tempted to put my hand up and said, I'll write you a Daredevil story where he's up against the Hand in rural Japan or something. You could draw that. But I was too cowardly to do that.
What about you, Richard? Who would you collaborate with if you could?
Oh, God. Do you know, I hated the guy's stuff initially when I started reading Star Wars Weekly. Carmine Infantino. I think him or Gil Kane, I'd quite happily ink their stuff. You know, I'm not much of an inker, but I'd quite happily sit and attempt to ink their stuff. Like I said, Infantino stuff in the Star Wars stories. As a child, I didn't like it. But as an adult, when I went back and reread them, I thought, this stuff's really good. I really like this guy's style because it was so stylish, because it stuck out. Same with Gil Kane. Or Steranko as well. Oh, you know, bad question to ask me because I could go on and on and on about it. Those two guys, Infantino, Gil Kane, or Steranko.
Okay. Well, Adam, what about you?
That's a real toughie. I've just been sitting here thinking about it, and the only one that really had a massive impact on me growing up, who was both a fantastic artist and writer, and he did write some of his other stuff for other artists, was David Mack, who did the Kabuki series, which I think he turned what I consider comics sort of largely on their head with the way he kind of hand painted all the pages, and it was so magnificent. And he also wrote for other sort of artists as well in the Kabuki the storyline, and they were just ultimately readable. He didn't do a lot of it, but I think, because that was an odd question, it's a really, I love the eras of comics, and I love reading stuff. I don't know, I've never really thought about collaborating with people I don't know, it's an odd one, but I think, for me, David Mack, when he started doing the colour Kabukis, I think it must have been early 90s, something like that, maybe mid 90s, maybe later, I don't know. But yeah, I think that would be my answer. Sorry, that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you again for the three of you for obviously agreeing to come on the channel and do this interview. It was really interesting to find and talk to different types of comic book artists that I've already spoken to, which was Joey last in the video before this, and to actually speak with two comic book artists, which I've never done before as well. So yeah, thank you. It was great insight into the more of the comic book world, because I'm still fairly new to it. So it's really great to know your guys' side of it compared to like me as a bit of an avid reader. And I hope you guys enjoyed the interview, and it wasn't too off-putting for any future interviews.
No, this was fun. Enjoyed this.
Can I say that the fourth issue of Shockwave is on Kickstarter now? It's Shockwave without a C, And if you go on Kickstarter, there's some great rewards, including getting some original art by these guys. You know, just own some original art.
Yeah, I'll everything. Obviously, any socials that I have of yours, I will put down in the description anyway, like I did with Orbis Studios. Anything that I have available, I'll be throwing down in the description. But thank you again, you three, for popping on. What I will do as well is, before the video outros, there will be a quick slideshow of all of the artwork that I have available from. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe, hit that bell icon so you know when I go live or post a new video. And I hope you enjoy more